Welcome to the Payments Trilogue, where 3 seasoned professionals discuss payments and more, for Europe and beyond.
Hello, my name is Michael Salmony, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Trilogue, where I'm joined by Gijs, who looks at things from the banking side, and Ralph, who looks at things from the fintech side. And this time we have another very special guest, Chris Skinner, who everybody who works in banking and payments must know. He writes books all the time, he publishes all the time, he has websites and newsletters and everything, and is super interesting and on everything around our topic. So, Chris, welcome. Tell us a bit more about yourself, and tell us about your latest thoughts, which I believe are around trust.
Hi, Michael, and Ralph. I've been in this industry for longer than most people. In fact, I have the saying now that I've been around payments and banking since before most of Earth was conceived. So it's my area of interest, but primarily around technology, the future, and how it's changing the financial world. And I've been writing about that for over 30 years, to be honest, 20 books, working on the newest one. And the newest one's theme is around digital trust in a deep fake world. And it turns that idea of the old cartoon that many of us know, of no one knows you're a dog on the internet, into how can I prove I'm a dog on the internet? Because now we've switched it kind of the other way around.
That sounds intriguing. So that sounds more like a political thing and deep fakes and AI and fake news rather than about banking and payments. Or where is the connection?
The connections around onboarding and money laundering, and it's all around KYC, know your customer, and how can I prove that I am me when I'm applying for something. And I'm finding the onboarding process for most digital financial services is becoming overly cumbersome and too difficult. At the same time, it has to be that way because it has to be that way. But there needs to be a better way.
So, Gijs, this is all your fault, right?
No, it's the regulator's fault, of course, and not the bank's fault. They just try to be compliant with any law or regulation that's out there, or what any supervisor deems necessary. But on the onboarding, Chris, the great promise of the EIDAS 2.0, the EU ID wallet, I learned is that specifically this onboarding, this cumbersome onboarding, should be made a lot easier for everybody. If every citizen, let alone the corporates, but let's stick to consumers, would avail of a state or non-state issued EU ID wallet filled with its verified credentials by that very member state, being able to say, hey, this is me, please onboard me. Do you see that potential too for the EIDAS 2.0 wallet?
To an extent, but everybody's attempted to crack this nut and failed. And I think that's the rub. SWIFT has tried to do it in the corporate context. The EU ID is trying to do it in the European context. And everything I've studied so far, and I've been involved in huge numbers of digital identity projects, has really failed because we don't have agreements across the board around how it works. We don't have good ways of making it work. And to a large extent, it's the balance between the fraudulent criminal community and the truthful general populace, and how to balance the customer experience between those two. And I don't think anybody solved it, and I don't think EU ID will solve it either. And the worst thing about EU ID, well, I shouldn't say the worst, because it's not even here yet. It's coming downstream. But who's telling anybody about it? And most people in Europe probably have no idea that it's coming. I'll tell you a little quick story, and I'm sorry, Mark, I'm going off stream here, but we've got roadworks outside our house that have been going on for 6 months, and my wife said to me they're going on for the next 3 years. I said, well, why hasn't anyone put a note through our letterbox saying that's going on? No communication, absolutely zero. And I feel the same about EUID.
I mean, I don't think the EU ID wallet is going to solve your plumbing works in Poland. I think that's
Well,
asking a bit much. But you
but
say there's
if I may, I have some good news. This is the Dutch. It was a press release of the Dutch Financial Conduct Authority the day before yesterday, who say new digital identity offers new opportunities, but could become a barrier to some consumers who are not so digitally savvy. And they've made a pretty good analysis of it, but also might help, but it could also, again, for those who are not so digitally savvy, be a problem. But at least it is a supervisory authority that is already proactively sort of communicating about it.
Yeah, but the thing is, you can do a press release. What about actually putting a leaflet
I,
drop?
I, I know, I know.
What about sending out an email to every citizen saying, are you aware you have this service?
Yeah, but
Yeah, well, if I could come in here, because you know, from our fintech or especially TPP perspective under open banking, one of our main reasons for wanting this identity wallet was as a substitute for some of the not so good strong customer authentication flows and apps by banks, so that this identity wallet can be used to authorize payments. And the reason we could convince the authorities, FISMA, about this, or DG Connect some years ago, when the whole thing was conceptualized, was that the payments use case is a daily use case, so that people would get the need, or would better understand the purpose of it and get used to it by using it for something which they do every day, and not just whatever showing their mobile passport, their what is it, car, the driving license, or their passport every once in a while. So daily use cases, I think, is exactly what will make it work. But I guess you're right. To get it into the people's mind in the first place is a big challenge.
Well, also, I think we have this big issue around digital identity fragmentation. And so, my main ID is my passport and my driving license, for example, and my residence card here in Poland, so I get access to Schengen. But then when I'm logging into services online, I've got maybe 60 services that I use, each of which has a username and password, some of which have the same username and password, some of which don't. And I got incredibly frustrated the other day because my children use Roblox and Minecraft, and they wanted me to log into Microsoft 365, and I couldn't remember the password. And then I realized if I reset it, that's all my business things are lost, as well as now giving them access. And the whole username and password thing is absolutely ridiculous in
I mean, I'm
2025.
sure everybody agrees with you with that. Passwords are a thing that were invented in the 1970s, and we can do a lot better than that.
Actually, the
But isn't there a
60s.
chance, or 60s maybe even, but
What?
isn't there a chance that sort of having this sort of attribute-based, standardized, harmonized way in Europe might get rid of all these silos? I think Germany has 56 different identity schemes alone. The Fraunhofer Institute did it. I mean, it's complete madness. So isn't there now an opportunity to have a sort of, although regulatory driven, at last getting a sort of more harmonized way which we can use for payments and for everything?
There is a strong argument for a harmonized digital wallet. I guess the questions lie around whether every country wants to have that wallet, because at the moment they all have different ones. Here in Poland, I guess the most prevalent is Blick. In the Netherlands, as you know, Ideal. If you look across the Nordic region, Swish and Vips. So it's kind of the case of what is going to make that work for all 27 members of the community, and what happens when you step outside that community. I made the comment a long time ago that I could fly from Beijing to anywhere in Europe and use Alipay as my wallet. Why can't I do that as a European when I fly to Beijing?
Well,
Fair enough.
you can now, but But I mean, there's a difference, of course. The regulation stipulates that by October, November 26, all EU member states must have one EU ID wallet, the basic wallet with the PID, the identity credentials stored in it. But that's it. That's only
Yeah, but
the basic
you know,
identity.
Keith, that you know that the European countries don't do what the Commission always tells them to do.
Well, that's not the Commission. It's the Council and the Parliament.
That's
It's a bloody regulation.
shocking thing to say, honestly.
It still doesn't
Yeah.
always work.
No, I agree. I mean, I have to see if all these member states will have that, even the most basic version of that identity wallet, let alone, I can say that because we are part of the new we build, which is the next level of large scale pilots that are trying to figure out what else you could do with this shiny new EU ID wallet in terms of payments. We had four consortia, now there's two called large scale pilots co-funded by the European Commission to see to figure out all sorts of use cases, which one of which is payments, and we have payments related frameworks on top of the basic EU ID thingy. We
Were
built.
you involved
Sorry.
in the digital wallet for the travel credentials,
Yeah.
or were you on one of the other ones?
No, so we will be in the new we build. There's two follow-up consortia which have been granted access, or yeah, what do you call whatever you want to call it, but have been okayed by the European Commission recently, which is the we build, which builds on the old EWC consortium, which is mostly Visa led, and who are very much into strong customer authentication. Ralph and Tink is very active in that, and the other is the former Nobit consortium called Aptitude, which builds on what especially the German Savings Bank has been working on in the first round, and probably the two consortia will work together on the payments use case. And there's public transport, air, whatever other use cases there are, but there's also a payments use case. And that might hold the promise, Chris, to have these, let's say, these payment wallets, the account-to-account wallets, to harmonize as well. But won't see that happen.
So if I go back to what I was saying earlier around my primary identity documents are passport and driving
Yep.
license, would the EU ID digital wallet replace that?
Yep. Good.
I think it goes beyond that, right? I mean, this is surely the point that in the past, a lot of these identity schemes have been based on passport and driving license, but you need also to verify whether I've been COVID vaccinated, whether I'm over 18, what my academic credentials are. You know, there are 100 other attributes. And this is what this EU ID wallet aims to do. It aims to verify all my attributes in all life situations. And the passport is maybe the wrong paradigm, because I don't want to show somebody all the data on my passport, you know, whether I've been to Israel and to Saudi Arabia, and you know, that's nobody's business if they're just verifying that I'm over 18. So that's why I think this attribute-based, not going beyond government identity, EU ID wallet is actually quite smart.
Yeah, but who owns the ID?
That is by the issuing institution. So my university will issue my academic, my health provider will tell whether I've been vaccinated, and the government will have the data on my passport. I mean, it sounds quite smart. But I don't want to put you on the spot, but you were saying there hasn't been a single success of an ID. What about the Nordics? I think they've put a very clever Nordic ID scheme together, which is used in all sorts of scenarios, not just payments. And there's a huge success, and the banks are in the middle of that. Isn't that an example which one could use as a reference?
The Nordics has certainly been in leadership in this area for some years now, as they were with adopting digital banking, internet banking 25 years ago. But what I mean by this is that at the moment I still feel it's too fragmented. There's too many different schemes, and there's too many difficulties in proving who you say you are. And it's getting worse, and there needs to be a fix. You know, my example of using online services for Roblox and Minecraft is just one. So you kind of go, well, there are some digital identities that must be completely authentic and secure, and then there are many others that are not authentic and not secure. And how do you differentiate between the two, and when? And equally, how easy would it be for someone with criminal intent to create a authentic, secure identity when it's not actually that person? You know, at the moment, I've just been writing about the levels of fraud, and I remember the head of global fraud for HSBC speaking at my financial services club 20 years ago and saying around 2% is an acceptable level. Ideally below that, but that's the maximum level. These days it's 5%. It's gone through the roof.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. But
Could
Ralph,
I
I
ask you
think
a question?
Yeah.
Well, could I ask you a question there? Because you've written a lot about that one of the big values of banks is the trust that people have in it and having the deposit there. And so this is how, like a big asset of banks over fintechs, which may have more functionality, but possibly less trust. And so when now, and I guess you are probably one of those promoting the possibility for banks to leverage that trust in providing more trust-based services and maybe credentials and this identification. Now, the government or the European Commission has taken the initiative of having the government issue these identity wallets, and we are actually currently seeing a bit of a competition now between the banks or how the banks want to use that wallet or not, with their own credentials or the government credentials, etc. So in this, how would you see the trust in banks competing with the trust in governments from an end user perspective? So what do you think is more trustworthy, government or banks?
Yeah, I mean, this is everything I'm writing about right now for my next book, Digital Trust in a Deepfake World, which I haven't even finished yet, so it's going to be a while before it comes out. But you have to realize that there's like an onion of trust, and onions have many layers, and the core of the onion in this case of trust is who is backing what you believe in. And if you believe in government, it's the government. If you believe in the internet and you're a libertarian, it's the network of the people. And I've had this debate for a long time between the crypto community and who are libertarians and the banking community who are not, although some seem to be moving that way. And the government, when I say you have trust in banking, you don't have trust in the bank's brand. You have trust in the bank's license. And so when I talk about trust in banking, it's about the fact that if I put my money and deposit there, up to €100,000, then it's guaranteed by an insurance scheme that it won't be lost. And it's those factors around trust, because in the crypto community, we've seen huge amounts of hacking and dilution from Mt. Gox through to Binance recently, with 1.5 billion hacked from their exchange. Why should I trust that platform if they can lose $1.5 billion in 2 hours? It was something like that, thanks to the North Koreans, is the alleged perpetrator. So the trust is around who is issuing the authority, and do I trust that authority?
But it's also interesting what you're saying, Chris. This onion of trust. To a certain extent, I would trust Kraken or whatever. But I wouldn't bet the farm on it. If, as they say in US, I wouldn't put my life savings in a crypto a world. But I would take a little gamble for €1,000. So my trust is enough to be okay if the North Koreans hack it and steal my €1,000 worth of Bitcoin. Okay, I'll survive, but I wouldn't bet the farm. And I need a higher level of trust to do that, and then that I would do with my bank, etc. So it's also, there's so many shades of gray in trust. What you would trust somebody or any institution
Yep.
with. ending with, of course, Mr. Elon Musk, because he seems to be the highest level of trust in these days in some parts of the world.
Well, I have this habit, and I recommend it to everybody, which is, and it started years ago when I first started using PayPal, that to begin with, I would only do small
Yeah.
transactions. And then gradually, as you realize it works and it seems to be pretty good, my usage grew. But I always say to folks, when you open a new account, or if somebody wants you to make a payment to them, to start off with, make sure it's just maybe €1 and just check it goes through comfortably and that you can trust that it's gone through, and then you can make a larger payment. But don't do a €50,000 payment on the first transaction, because if you get a number wrong, if you do something stupid, it's gone.
Yep.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, on these levels of trust, they're technically, coming back to the EU ID wallet, there are going to be several levels of trust. Some like government proven 100%, and some lower level, and some of the lower level might be useful too. Like Facebook might put in there that I'm interested in French claret wines, right? And that's not 100% guaranteed, but that's something which somebody might want to use as an attribute, right? So I don't think everything needs to be 100% certified. Depends on the use case. That's one comment, and the other one is it's also psychologically really complex. It wasn't me. I think it may have been your colleague Dave Birch who brought this example, who said that I would trust to give my kidney to my son, no problem, but would I trust him to give him my credit card? Definitely not. So you have sort of things which you would think are very highly trusted, which sometimes go the other way around, right? So it's a technical up to a psychological issue.
If you've met Dave Birch's children, you'll know that that's the reason. There's something else.
But Chris,
But
coming back to the topic of your new book, where is all this gonna end in a perfect deep fake world? How ultimately, I mean, with all waterproof or stamps or whatever things. I'm not a technical person. But you could still, because there's a watermark or a little stamp that you can see, it's has been tangled with, or it's not real or whatever. But this will all be solved, of course, by those who want to convince me that I'm not talking to you as a live Chris, but a deep fake AI powered version of yourself. Chris, where is that going to end?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, it's quite interesting because the UK has just brought in some new regulatory drive to create new corporate identity systems, and equally America has theirs and Asia has theirs, and it varies by every region. And I can't see us having one central global standardized identity scheme, because it'd be too likely to have systemic failure. But you have to ask, what is the granularity that comes in here? So the EU ID is coming in 2026. It's been in force since 2024. And I just sit and think, why is it that I have so many obstacles to access financial services, be onboarded, to have KYC, and equally, how is it that there are 1 in 20 people who can commit fraudulent transactions because they got through those obstacles and barriers and broke them? It's a very difficult balance, and I think the technology we use these days is making it worse, to be honest.
Are you aware of this project? I think it's called WorldCoin by Sam Altman. The OpenAI guy, and one of his separate projects there, where he's trying to solve the problem of differentiating between real humans and the rest, and whatever AI and whatever fake may come up, by having this iris scan thing that you do in order to prove that you're human.
I'm aware of it. I don't think it's taken off because I haven't seen much about it recently. But,
Yeah, me
and
neither.
it's also
And
interesting because we
there,
talk a lot these days about agentic AI
Mhm.
and bot-to-bot transactions where no humans involved. So now I can delegate my identity to a bot, and then my bot just goes wild on the network. Who knows?
yeah, well, on that one,
And that's
because
someone's
we
fault.
when we had Dave Birch on here, I was asking him about the concept of bank GPT, like a bot doing the banking for me, and it's one of his themes there that the real revolution in AI and in banking is the customer becoming like basically more intelligent and using bots there. So, and banks being unprepared for clever, really clever customers doing what they are otherwise too lazy to do, shifting
Well, you
money to
guys are
better
old enough to
accounts and all
know that
that.
we've had that concept for 30 years. Of intermediaries. Instead of an intermediary, it's the bot-to-bot intermediary that does everything for us
Mhm.
and makes our life easier. And I think it comes down to for simple day-to-day transactional systems that will probably work. A bit like contactless payments, which admittedly, you know, the ceiling on contactless payments is rising, but the reason why contactless payments works is it's simple day-to-day transactional payments that are of low value. When it comes to something of high value, a mortgage settlement, for example, you definitely want to have that handled by a trusted intermediary that is licensed. So it's really down to scale and risk.
Yep.
Could I come back to your Minecraft example there? There is, of course, in on the internet, I want to be seen as a dog in whatever some circumstances. So I want to have multiple identities. So I want to have, I guess I have to have my sort of real identity when it comes to, banking and buying houses and all of that. But if I want to play Minecraft or go on some other websites, I do not want to be known as my real identity. So I want to have a fake or different identity or multiple
Mhm.
identities that I can use and prove some sort of proof for that.
Well, it's my favorite example in my presentations around why banking will always exist. In that, when I was in Second Life, which you may remember from 20 years ago, I was a girl. And that was purely because I was just being stupid. I don't know why I did that, but it got very interesting in some conversations. But then Ginkgo Bank was the biggest bank in Second Life, and it disappeared one day because the guy who ran Ginkgo Bank hit the delete button and took all the money. It was $1.5 million. He was a student in Sao Paulo in Brazil, and that's the reason why you need licensed institutions to store and exchange money, because you've got to have someone that's not being run by a student in Brazil or
I mean,
anywhere
that
else for that
example,
matter.
that example you just gave with the Genco Bank, and also your mention of the UK improving how companies is the sort of B2B trust angle, which again people don't talk
Mm.
enough about, right? I mean, you can register any old company at Companies House in the UK, give it any old name, and that of course is wonderful for fraudsters who say, let's put this in the Barclays secure trust account, and it's actually run by some. Somebody who's less than dodgy. So
I have
have you
noted
looked
you
at
picked on
B2B trust?
Barclays. I've noted you picked on Barclays there, Michael. I've written that down now.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say some Bulgarian who actually owns it, but I didn't say that.
But they had an
Ah,
outage, I believe, didn't they? In-
But have you looked
uh,
at B2B trust in your new book? Is that, or are you only looking at consumers and robots and?
not so much because the way in which I write, I'm trying to get the broadest appeal, and I think a lot of the things I could write about in capital markets and investment banking, commercial banking, maybe doesn't have that broad appeal. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
tends to be targeted towards much more the retail
yeah.
consumer end. But I do find it interesting that you may remember, and this was some years ago, there was an awful lot of companies trying to tackle the politically exposed persons database and the way in which that worked in corporate commercial banking relationships. And I like the ideas that people had around databases that would be open and shared, but again, I've not seen anyone crack the nut. And these days we talk an awful lot about distributed ledger technology can solve this because it's immutable, and once it's on the ledger, it's never going to be altered. It doesn't solve it because
No.
people are very good, particularly those with criminal intent, at bucking the system.
Hmm.
And specifically, if you go back to the Bulgarians, which is this, spy ring run by Jan Marsalek from Wirecard that I was blogging about the other day, a lot of that was social engineering. It's nothing to do with technology.
Yeah, very good. Exactly.
No,
Yeah.
that's good that you make that point, Chris. We should have not have any illusion that with any technology we can root out any criminality as long as there is a human factor which can be socially engineered to do stuff with that perfect technology that you shouldn't do. So I don't see how we can solve the human factor being the weakest link in the whole chain in any
And
scenario. How we can solve that?
I mean, there has to be a solution over time, and I think the digital wallet from the EUID is a good step along the way of getting there. And eventually, it does mean that instead of having a physical passport, and the reason I'm leaning over is, here is mine in my nice blue livery, which I know you can't see very well, but used to be purple, it's now blue. Um, you know, if we can make that digital, then that would be fantastic. And I had this vision a long time ago, and I still have it, that eventually every single human on Earth will have some digital chip inside, intel inside every human.
Hmm.
That means that wherever you go, whatever you do, everyone can check it's you.
But then you have to implant that chip at birth,
But
and it has to be implanted by somebody who can give you that identity. And who is that going to be?
And also the question is, where do you stick it?
Yeah.
okay, we're going. I mean, the passport thing is not so science fiction. I believe in the US, you can already put your driver's license
I
and
have a chip in
your
my passport. I mean,
yeah, but this is actually in your phone, which in a
yeah, yeah,
digital
yeah,
that Chris I think is
yeah.
Yeah,
calling
but
for.
in Sweden, they've had a digital ID chip that you can implant in your, body
Yeah,
for some
yeah.
years. But most people don't want it because they think the government's going to track and trace them.
Who would have thought that? Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm not sure how positive this episode was. I think we all ended up rather in a bit of a doom and gloom, and the only thing that will save us is being implanted by a neutral robot. But yeah, unless anybody has any last minute emergency things to say,
I
I
was just
would.
a question still to Chris. Oh, sorry, Michael. What
No,
happened
go.
to the metaverse? I haven't heard that term for some time. To be honest, did it just go away, or what?
No, it's still there. And in fact, I was writing the other day around your digital twin is in danger,
Yeah.
which goes back to, this whole conversation, which is you now have two yous. You have, your physical you and your digital you. And your digital you is the one that we haven't actually solved the conundrum, although there's lots of things that are moving towards trying to solve it. But
Mhm.
what we need, and quite rightly, as Ralph said, in some worlds, I don't want to be recognized as Chris Skinner. I might want to be a girl or whatever I want to be, a dog. But when it comes to formal transactional, financial, and government affairs, I want to have a unique identity that is recognized and secure. And we are getting there, but it's just taken us a long time to get there. Bear in mind, the internet's only just over 30 years old,
Mm.
so there's still time.
Yeah, I actually have two identities because after this Brexit nonsense, I had to get myself a German passport as well. So I'm happy having two government identities, and I don't know how many digital identities. So it's only going to get more complex. But anyway, thank you very much, Chris, for being with us. You've been very entertaining, very insightful as always. And Gijs and Ralph have done some really excellent comments and probed you, I hope, in a not too intrusive way. So thanks for being with us, and hope everybody who watched this episode enjoyed it too, and look forward to seeing you the next time.
Take care, Chris.
Take care, guys.
Many thanks for watching and listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Looking forward to seeing you again next time.